Imagine looking up at the night sky, and seeing colossal rings stretching across the heavens. Glowing arcs of light that never fade, casting shadows across continents, rewriting the rhythm of life itself. One cosmic change, endless consequences. The Earth we know is balanced, familiar, and predictable. But what if it carried rings like Saturn? This single transformation would alter our nights, our cultures, our climates, and even the way humanity sees itself. Let's journey through the story of a ringed Earth, a world both beautiful and dangerous. Imagine walking outside at night. Normally, you see stars and maybe the moon shining in the sky. But now, picture something amazing, huge rings stretching across the heavens, glowing like giant silver and golden arcs. They shine so brightly that the whole sky looks magical. If Earth had rings like Saturn, nights would never be truly dark. Even in the countryside, far away from city lights, the rings would glow above you. Streets, forests, and deserts would all be lit by their shine. People would live in a world where night feels more like a soft twilight than real darkness. This would change how humans live. Our bodies are used to sleeping in the dark, but with glowing rings, it might be harder to rest. Some people could struggle with sleep, while others might enjoy the beauty. Children growing up would never know what a completely dark sky looks like. They wouldn't see the Milky Way clearly, but they would always see the shining rings. Artists would paint them, poets would write about them, and people would celebrate under their glow. The rings would become part of human culture, like a symbol of wonder and mystery. Imagine festivals where people gather to watch the rings, or stories passed down about their meaning. But the rings would also cause problems. They would reflect sunlight unevenly, casting shadows across the earth. Some places might get too much light, while others would stay dim. Farmers would have to change how they grow crops. Plants might grow faster in brighter areas, but slower in places stuck in shadow. Animals would be affected too. Owls, bats, and other creatures that hunt in darkness would lose their advantage. Prey animals that hide at night would be easier to spot. This could change entire ecosystems, with some animals thriving and others disappearing. Still, the sight would be breathtaking. Standing under the rings, you would feel small but amazed. They would remind us that Earth is part of a bigger universe, full of wonders we can barely imagine. Nights of eternal glow would be beautiful, strange, and unforgettable. They would change the way humans dream, live, and see the world forever. Imagine living in a world where giant glowing rings shine across the sky every single night. People would not just see them as part of nature, they would give them meaning. From the very beginning of history, humans have looked at the sky and created stories. With rings above Earth, those stories would be even bigger. Ancient civilizations might believe the rings were a sign from the gods. Some might think they were golden bridges connecting heaven and earth. Others could see them as shields protecting the planet, or even as paths for angels and spirits. Every culture would build myths around the glowing arcs. Festivals would be held under the rings. Imagine people dancing, singing, and lighting fires while the rings shine above them. The rings would become part of religion, art, and daily life. They would inspire songs, poems, and paintings. Just like the moon inspired myths in our real world, the rings would be the center of human imagination. Children would grow up hearing bedtime stories about the rings. Heroes might be said to climb them, gods might be said to live upon them, and legends would explain how they came to be. The rings would be more than science, they would be symbols of hope, mystery, and eternity. Even in modern times, the rings would still hold meaning. People might see them as reminders of how small we are compared to the universe. Couples might fall in love under their glow, and families might gather to watch them together. The rings would shape human culture forever. But myths can also cause conflict. Different groups might argue about what the rings mean. Are they a gift? A warning? A sign of power? Wars have been fought over symbols before, and the rings could become the most powerful symbol of all. In the end, the rings would not just change the sky, they would change the human heart. They would remind us to dream bigger, to wonder more, and to see the universe as full of mystery. Imagine standing on a ship in the middle of the ocean. Today, sailors use stars, compasses, and GPS to find their way. But if Earth had giant rings like Saturn, navigation would look very different. The rings would stretch across the sky like glowing highways. No matter where you were on Earth, you could look up and see them pointing in a clear direction. Sailors could use the rings as guides, steering their ships by the arcs above. Travelers on land could follow the rings like a map in the sky. In ancient times, before technology, the rings would be the most important tool for explorers. They would mark seasons, directions, and even time. Imagine a farmer knowing when to plant crops by watching how the rings shine at night. Or a traveler setting out on a journey by following the glow of the arcs. The rings would also change how maps are drawn. Instead of just using the sun and stars, people would design maps that connect to the rings. Roads and cities might even be built in alignment with them, so that the arcs above always point the way. But navigation wouldn't be perfect. The rings would cast shadows across the earth, sometimes making it harder to see the stars. Explorers who rely on constellations might struggle. Pilots flying planes could face challenges when the rings block parts of the sky. Still, the rings would be a constant reminder of direction. They would give humans a sense of order, like giant cosmic signposts. People would feel connected to the universe every time they looked up. For children growing up in this world, the rings would be their compass. They wouldn't just learn north, south, east, and west, they would learn to follow the arcs above. Navigation would become not just science, but a daily part of life shaped by the rings. Imagine the rings above Earth shining brightly, but also blocking sunlight. Just like clouds can cast shadows, the rings would throw giant shadows across the planet. Some places would live in constant twilight, while others would glow almost all the time. This would change daily life in big ways. Farmers would struggle because crops need balanced sunlight. In areas under the ring's shadow, plants might not grow well. Food supplies could shrink, and people would have to invent new farming methods. In brighter regions, plants might grow too quickly or dry out from too much light. Agriculture would become a challenge everywhere. The weather would also change. Shadows would cool some regions, while constant light would heat others. This imbalance could cause stronger winds, storms, and unusual climates. Deserts might appear where fertile land once was, and icy regions could melt under extra sunlight. For humans, life would depend on location. Cities under the shadow might live in permanent twilight, with streets always dim. People there would adapt by using more artificial light. In glowing regions, nights would feel like endless sunsets, and people might never see true darkness. Animals would face challenges too. Some creatures rely on the natural rhythm of day and night. With shadows and a constant glow, their instincts would be confused. Birds might migrate differently, insects might swarm in new patterns, and predators could lose their hunting advantage. Despite the problems, the sight would be unforgettable. Imagine standing in a city where the rings cast a giant stripe of shadow across the sky. The horizon would look divided, half glowing, half dim. It would be both beautiful and unsettling. The rings would not just decorate the sky, they would reshape the earth itself. Shadows across continents would remind us that beauty can also bring struggle and that even small changes in sunlight can transform life on our planet. If Earth had giant rings like Saturn, the natural world would change in surprising ways. Plants, animals, and even tiny insects would have to adapt to the new patterns of light and shadow. Think about plants first. Some areas under the ring's glow would get extra light, almost like having a second sun at night. Crops in those places might grow faster, but they could also dry out or burn from too much brightness. In shadowed regions, plants might struggle to grow at all. Farmers would need new ways to protect their fields, maybe using special lights or moving crops to better areas. Forests could look very different, with some trees growing tall and strong while others fade away. Animals would face even bigger challenges. Nocturnal creatures, animals that come out at night, would lose their darkness. Owls, bats, and big cats that hunt in the shadows would find it harder to sneak up on prey. Prey animals, like rabbits or mice, would be easier to spot under the glow of the rings. This could cause some species to disappear, while others grow in number. Sea life would change too. Many ocean creatures follow the moon's light to move or hunt. Without the moon as their guide, and with rings shining instead, their patterns would shift. Turtles that use moonlight to find the sea might get confused. Fish that rise and fall with the tides would face new rhythms. Insects would also be affected. Fireflies, moths, and other bugs that use darkness to survive might struggle. Some might adapt by glowing brighter or hiding deeper in forests. Others could vanish completely. Over time, evolution, the way species change to survive, would bend to the rings. New animals might appear that thrive in a constant glow. Plants might evolve to use less sunlight or store energy differently. The Earth would become a new kind of planet, shaped by the rings above. For humans, this would be both amazing and scary. We would watch as familiar animals disappear and new ones take their place. Our food, our environment, and even the way we live would depend on how ecosystems transform. The rings would not just change the sky, they would rewrite the story of life on Earth. If Earth had giant rings like Saturn, the weather and climate would change in big ways. The rings would block sunlight in some places and reflect extra light in others. This uneven sunlight would make Earth's climate unstable. Some regions under the ring's shadow would stay cooler than normal. Crops might not grow well there, and people would need to find new ways to farm. Other regions, where the rings reflect more light, would get hotter. Deserts could spread wider, and fertile lands might dry out. Storms would also become stronger. When one part of Earth is hot and another part is cool, winds rush to balance the difference. With the rings creating extreme hot and cold zones, powerful storms, hurricanes, and unusual weather could happen more often. Ice caps at the poles might melt faster if they get extra sunlight. Rising seas could flood coastal cities. At the same time, places under shadow might freeze more often, creating new icy regions where people once lived. Humans would struggle to adapt. Farmers would have to invent new methods to grow food. Cities might move to safer areas. Nations could fight over land and resources as climates shift. Life would become harder in many places. Animals and plants would also face challenges. Some species would vanish because they couldn't handle the new climate. Others would adapt and thrive. Evolution would speed up as life tries to survive in a world of chaos. Even though the rings would look beautiful in the sky, they would bring danger to Earth's balance. Climate chaos would remind us that even small changes in sunlight can transform the planet. Imagine living in a world where the rings shine above you every single night. No matter where you are, in a city, a village, or deep in the countryside, you look up and see glowing arcs stretching across the sky. Humanity would never forget them. For people, the rings would be more than just science. They would become part of our emotions, our stories, and our identity. Families might gather outside to watch them together. Couples might fall in love under their glow. Children would grow up drawing them in their notebooks, dreaming of what they mean. The rings would remind us that Earth is part of something bigger. Every time we looked up, we would feel small but connected to the universe. They would inspire awe, wonder, and maybe even humility. People would realize that our planet is fragile, and that the cosmos is full of mysteries we don't fully understand. Artists would paint the rings in every style. Musicians would write songs about them. Writers would create stories where the rings are symbols of hope, eternity, or even warning. The rings would shape human culture, just like the moon and stars have shaped myths in our real world. But not everyone would see them the same way. Some people might feel comforted by their beauty, while others might feel uneasy living under something so powerful. Different cultures could argue about what the rings mean. Are they a gift, a sign, or a danger. Humanity's perspective would be divided but always deeply emotional. In the end, the rings would change how we see ourselves. They would remind us that we are part of a vast universe and that our lives are connected to forces far beyond our control. Humanity would live under the glow of eternity, forever shaped by the arcs above. If Earth had giant rings like Saturn, humans would not just watch them, we would try to adapt and use them. Over time, technology, science, and culture would change to fit this new world. Satellites in space would have to orbit differently. Today, satellites circle Earth freely, but with rings in the way, scientists would need new paths. Some satellites might even use the rings' materials to build stronger systems. Space travel would look very different, with rockets flying through glowing arcs before reaching the stars. Cities and monuments might be designed to line up with the rings. Imagine buildings built so that their towers point directly at the arcs above. Architects would use the rings as inspiration, creating skylines that shine under their glow. Festivals and holidays could be timed to the ring's brightest moments, turning science into celebration. Science itself would grow faster. Astronomers would study the rings every day, learning how they reflect light and change Earth's climate. Children in schools would learn about the rings as part of daily life, just like we learn about the moon today. The rings would inspire new questions about the universe, pushing humans to explore further. But the future would not be easy. Climate problems caused by the rings would force humans to invent new ways to survive. Farmers might use artificial lights to balance crops. Engineers could build machines to control water and weather. Technology would become the key to living in a world shaped by the rings. Culturally, the rings would remain powerful symbols. They would appear on flags, coins, and art. People might see them as reminders of eternity or warnings of how fragile Earth is. The rings would shape not only science but also human identity. In the future of a ringed Earth, humanity would adapt, but always with the rings above us, reminding us that beauty can be both a gift and a challenge.